Well, I think everyone is myself certainly, very excited to hear about your views of the intersection of Jewish law, the Talmud, Jewish tradition, and modern legal practice. But indulge me, please. I have to ask you a more personal question, and that is this colossal feat of having translated the Talmud. You began that effort, I think, when you were 28 years old, if I'm doing my math correctly. It was a 40-plus year effort. Why did you do it? What gave you the confidence to think you could do it?
Well, there are two different questions. Why I did it was very simple. I did it because I thought it was needed. I thought it's a job that has to be done. Now, the fact that I have done it was possibly because I was young and stupid. Which means I didn't know it will take so much time. I still hope that it won't be my magnum opus of my lifetime. I hope to do more things and hopefully more important things. But it took lots of time. But I really didn't know how enormous this work will be. And I must say, I didn't know, when I was a young man, I lived in a socialist country, basically. Israel was a socialist country. Money wasn't a point that people were talking about, not at my home. Just we weren't talking about money. Later on, when I had to do this work, I understood that's my first, I found in my experience in America, I knew when I came to America, even though I never used them, but I knew that there were lots and lots of four-letter words. I knew them. Say, I don't use them because it's something of a personal inhibition. I cannot use them. So, not in Hebrew, not in English, not in any other language. Don't use them. Possibly because I never understood it until I became older, that in my home, I never heard a dirty word spoken either as a joke or in anger. Never. Not hardly ever, but never. So it's possibly somehow my ears were not made for pronouncing it. Anyway, when I came to America, I found that there is a word that is much uglier than all the four-letter words. It's a five-letter word, and it begins with an M. So you know this word. It's usual people. But anyway, it was also a hardship to find it, to gather it, to get it. It took also time, which I didn't consider at the beginning. Okay, so you have now a full answer, almost.
All right, thank you. Well, let's jump into the topic of the day. And I want to start, Rabbi, if I can, with a basic feature of the human condition: crime and punishment. And punishment under our American system, and I think under many systems, has several goals. Individual deterrence, to stop that offender from offending again. General deterrence, to send a message to the world at large not to commit these crimes. Public safety, keep dangerous criminals off the streets. And at least theoretically, rehabilitation, although one can doubt the effectiveness of that goal. How does Jewish law, Jewish tradition, the Talmud, view punishment? What are the purposes of punishment in Jewish tradition?
If I would like, I'm not trying to tackle a lawyer. It's like biting a snake. It's always dangerous, you know. You let me, because you are a lawyer, and because, see, I ask people as examination Bible, where is the snake? Where is the lawyer mentioned first in the Bible?
Nowhere, correct?
And I said that the lawyer is mentioned in the 3rd chapter of Book of Genesis, where it says, it doesn't say it openly because it will be liable to criminal offense. It says, and the lawyer was the most subtle of all the animals in the garden. Now, if you want a proof for it, if you read the next verse after that, how the snake begins to speak with Eve. And he says a sentence that no person except a lawyer will use. Afki amar Elokim. Even though, God said, who begins a sentence with even though? Even though it's a clearly legal parlance. So it's clearly he was a lawyer. Anyway, he got his, coming back to the point, I would say that the problem about punishment, crime we know. About punishment, it's really all the answers given for all the explanations given for punishment are seemingly they don't work. The question whether any punishment is a deterrent of people to do crimes is very doubtful. It's very well known, a story about in England when they used to hang felons in public, and it was everybody came, especially ladies. Strange, but ladies were very fond of seeing the hangings, and in those times people were hanged after say stealing more than I suppose 10 shillings. People were hanged. Those who stole less, they were not considered good enough, and they were sent to Australia. So, but that's a different question. But anyway, so the people were hanged there, and still it was a place when you saw criminals, especially thieves, being hanged, and it was the place was notorious for pickpocketing. So they seem people that saw how a fellow tradesman is being hanged for it, and they were to steal pocket. So it seems that it doesn't work. By the way, also now the rehabilitation is how to say. If you meet these places, there are of course exceptions, but usually when you send into a prison a small criminal, he gets their education and refinement and expertise, so he gets out a bigger criminal. That is almost true in almost all cases. Sorry, there are exceptions, but usually that's the way. Now, about making a point of it, which is again, it's not clear what you are making. You didn't mention one thing, which is, I think, the Jewish law. It's not Talmudic law, but seems there are 2 points in which the Jewish law, in a way, speaks about it, because Jewish law is usually not in the Bible and not in the Talmud. Is not usually given to give explanations. You get laws, and the laws are not given explanations. It is because of so and such. I can go and explain this thing, why there are no explanations. But that's not the point. The point is that there are not usually no explanations. But still there is a notion about punishment. That one notion there is I would say, a notion that is not popular today. It's vengeance. Punishment is vengeance. Vengeance of one private person on a private person, of society on other people. This is as good an answer as any of the answers that I hear see in legal parlance about it. It may not be popular, but it's vengeance. And if you are human beings, I suppose you are here, all of you human beings. You see, when you get kicked, or when you get slapped, or when you get offended, there may be, yet you are, as theoretical Christians are supposed to do, to give that second cheek. No, very few Christians do it, practically. More Jews did it than Christians, for all kinds of reasons, but usually the first the first emotion is not to give you the second cheek. The first emotion is, if somebody slapped you, at least slap him twice. And about offense, about other things, which is, vengeance is a very real, true feeling that people have it, whether they want it or not. But so it is a part of it, and the problem is, in general, speaking in general, what is the punishment is not for achieving a special reason, but just for I would say, doing the act of vengeance against people. Even though I would say the Bible and other books, other Jewish books also speak about it in a different way, especially when they speak about death punishment and so on. They say that a living criminal is abomination. A living criminal is something despicable. A living criminal is something that defiles the land he lives in. So you can't allow something like this to survive. It's not because you want to change society. The question is, look, if punishments were given for people just because they not to encourage other people to do so, or especially because they encourage other people. Just imagine somebody killed his mother-in-law.
So, Rabbi,
what would you say? Is it how many mothers-in-law do you have? Usually only one. So why should it be given the death penalty? But I'm saying the notion is not because it's a deterrent, but it is the notion there's something, so to say, impossible about crime in the world. So you have to wipe it out. So in one way or another. Now, incidentally, the Jewish law didn't basically, I mean, there are details about it, didn't have a punishment of prison, never. I mean, there was only, people were kept detained until they were judged. But there was prison as a punishment. They didn't consider it not fair, not good, not helpful to anything. This is just by the way. They were flogging people, but not otherwise. Yes?
So we spoke about vengeance and you spoke about hangings, so that does lead me to a question about the death penalty. We know that the death penalty is provided for in Jewish law. Is there a notion of cruel and unusual punishment? And let me tell you how this is such a current subject. It's always a current subject, but only in the last couple of weeks. There was an execution in Arizona in which the defendant was given a lethal injection. It took 90 minutes to take effect. He was apparently in evident pain. It required 15 repeat injections. What does Jewish law have to say, if anything, about the notion of cruel and unusual punishment? Is there that notion in the death penalty?
Of course, there is a notion about the Jewish death penalty. It is a funny way to say it. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. And the sentence is repeated about 7 or 8 times in the Talmud, and the explanations in those cases is B'ror lo mita yafa. Find for him a good, clean death. That is Ve'ahavta. That is loving your friend. And in a way it says, by the way, it says also, that even when you hate somebody, even when you think that the person has to be killed, still the notion of loving another human being is at least goes. If you kill him, you should do it in the nicest, easiest way that the law provides. So that is the now. Look, as not being an American and as not having the McCarthy still holding here the country, I would say that American in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, showed how inefficient they are. That is, it has nothing to do with the cruel and unusual punishment. It's just inefficient. If you cannot kill a person by giving him a giving a little poison. It shows inefficiency. But the question is, what will happen if it comes again? It happened also with the electric chair. It did. I'm sorry to, but you see, you brought it upon yourself. You see, one of the ways in which it's hardly failed was the guillotine.
The guillotine?
Yes, the guillotine was. Now, incidentally, the person who invented it was a doctor. And he was a doctor, and he did it just for these elements. He said, other ways of killing people are cruel, prolonged. This is short, efficient, very fast. And so he did it because he was a lover of humanity. See? So the fact that you don't do it, I really, again, speaking about this element of cruel and unusual punishment, I think a guillotine is one of those ways in which it's perhaps not unusual in America, but you can make it usual. Put the law like this, but it is surely one of the fastest way to get rid of a human being. It's very, very rarely that it failed.
So you mentioned, I'm going to take this opportunity to take this conversation a somewhat different direction. You mentioned Afghanistan and Pakistan, which I'll take as license to ask you about international law and laws of war. And what I want to talk to you about is the killing of civilians. Now, this is obviously a very hot topic, a very live topic today. But I don't want to talk about Israel now. Let me make it easier. In World War II, America carpet bombed Dresden, Tokyo, other cities. Of course, we dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In other words, we deliberately killed civilians to bring about an end to a war. And my question is, what is the Jewish view of that?
See, look, basically, Jewish view, if I'm taking it, and it is surely not an easy subject to deal, not because it's, of course, it's an emotional subject, and people speak about it, and speaking, I'm not trying to defend Israel by any means, I mean, but speaking about it, basically, see, the way that NATO was doing its work quite recently under the umbrella of an international organization, how they destroyed several cities, everybody, not to speak how the Russians work, because they are notorious for it, and also how Americans work with all these things. So the point about it is that civilians were killed and are killed, and in a way we are, I'm going out of Talmudic law, other law, we're going in some kind of a discussion of the subject. See, in a certain way, the world of today changed the laws of war from the let me put it this way, from the enlightened way of doing war in the Middle Ages to the more modern way, which is far more cruel, perhaps more efficient, because for a long time, war was something that happened between people, men mostly, making war on each other. So civilians were exempt from being killed, whether it was useful or not useful, because war was, you may call it, it was perhaps a manly game. There were also women that were occupied in this thing. I don't think it's just men because of the hormones. I suppose it was, but anyway, war was confined to people, fighters that are going to war, are fighting against each other, and therefore the fight has to be in so many ways managed, and not always humane, but at least it is honest, fair, and so on. Now, as modern times came in our world, we had more and more of a humanistic balance and non-humanistic needs, because when machine guns enter the world and many other ways enter the world, when the war by planes and by air fight entered into the world, there was a basic change in which the war became a total experience. War is no longer a matter of one champion fighting another champion. It's no longer like this. David and Goliath fighting, you send your champion, we send our champion. The one that wins is a winner. That's it. Very nice, very human, very advanced. Say, just imagine that America would do it against another country, but it's no longer that, because war became less chivalrous. There are no notion of honor in war. So war became something that is total. Now, total war means in one way or another. It depends on how you do it, directly or indirectly. But civilians are killed.
And are there any limitations on the killing of civilians that we can draw from our tradition?
You see, our tradition, basically, when it means with fighting. So fighting is, again, it's between men that are fighting. That's fighting. Now, what happened to civilians as civilians, or to people who are not involved in the war? So they can be captured, they can be sent, so they can be sold to slavery and so on. But basically, they are immune from being killed. Incidentally, let me just add, Islam as a religion is far better than the way it is practiced. Because Islam as a religion also doesn't accept killing of children of women and women. Never. So what happens today is what I call they became modernized and westernized, because basically, as if they would code to their own tradition, they wouldn't do what they are doing today. And this whole notion of what they are doing today, I mean, the terror, and with all forms of terror, which is, I know it's surely not nice to say it, but it is a great part of it in the world now. Terror is done by Muslims, mostly against other Muslims. They don't really care about that. It's against the Muslim law, but they don't care really about the Muslim law. They are what I call. See, there is a certain kind of a movement of reformation in Islam. Once you killed only men, now you are reformed and you make equality. So you kill also women, and if you can, you kill also children or unborn children. But I'm saying that's a part of the thing. So basically, war not Jewish war, not other war. War was a confined thing that was done. Now it's a different thing, which is we are doing it because we do what is useful. And what is useful sometimes, if you destroy, let's say, if you have a way of destroying certain professions, that would be more efficient than killing soldiers.
So let me ask you this, if you'd like some water.
Yes, I will take some if there is.
The last speaker in one of the sessions that just preceded us was about medical ethics and told an interesting, or gave an interesting lesson of the physician, the Israeli medic, who must, under Jewish tradition, risk his life to save the soldier on the battlefield. Even though he's putting his own life at risk, because the morale of the Israeli army, the morale of an entire war effort, depends on every soldier's understanding that his life will be saved. Now, war raises all sorts of difficult questions and dilemmas. Recently, we've seen exchanges of hostages for soldiers. America traded one soldier for 5 Taliban operatives. Israel, of course, has traded hundreds for one life. And the consequence of that, it seems to me, is you're saving a life, maybe 2 lives of soldiers, but you're putting at risk thousands of other lives by releasing so many hostages. What does the tradition tell us about that? How is that permissible?
Tradition is very clear. Tradition doesn't permit it. That's the point. Look, I don't have, what can I say? In here you are polite people. Nobody brought in any rotten vegetable to throw on me, right? Now, so it's very nice of you, you see, because you see, you are polite people and so on. No rotten eggs, right? No, except unless the hotel provides them. But I don't see it. Okay, but I'm saying 30 years ago when there was this first agreement, as much as I could, I wrote about it. I wasn't the only one. Wrote about it and spoke about it. I said the Jewish law specifically says that prisoners, prisoners shouldn't be released beyond their value, whatever the value is, which means you cannot overpay for any prisoner. So this is against the Jewish law. And even if it wouldn't it was on the face of it, it was obvious that when you do it, even if you are not releasing just a number of killers that were put in prison for the very good reason that they are killers. Look, some of those people that were released in what are called the Shalit, in the Shalit exchange, were killers. They were killers, and even though Israeli military law and something basically even in Israel, the death penalty is still acknowledged as a possibility. The only person that was killed in the history of the state of Israel was Eichmann. He was the only person that was killed officially by the state. Nobody else. So there are people that should really deserve to be killed for some of the things that have been done were really horrific and really disgusting from any point of view. But so I'm saying that releasing these people, incidentally, if you know, those people who kidnapped the 3 boys in Israel, they were also, they are now back in prison. They caught them at the end. But there were people that were condemned to really not to death, but condemned in the Israeli courts for killing. But that is another argument. The basic argument is that you shouldn't encourage the practice of kidnapping people, and you should, when you take it something and you pay for it, it means that this is encouraged, and that is what we did so for a long time, encourage, and that is what the Hamas tried very hard to do, is trying to get any one person at least kidnapped, because then it's a way of changing, of getting more and more prizes for that. So because of that, I'm saying that Jewish law is in that case clear. It's clear in that sense. And there is the famous story of the Maharam Rotenberg. He was the chief rabbi, basically, of the German Jewry, perhaps much bigger than that. But he was the number 1 scholar, perhaps, in his time. And one of the princes took him as a prisoner, just in order to get as much money as they could for redeeming him. So he was in prison, and he forbade the community, every community, to pay for him. He forbade them to pay. And so he sat until his death, 12 years in prison, until he died. He didn't want to be released. After his death, of course, there were always the tzaddikim. There was one Jew that paid an enormous sum of money to redeem the body, and it was given as a reward to be buried near the rabbi. But you see, the rabbi, as long as he was alive, as he was active, he forbade to doing it. He forbade doing it even though it was he himself involved. So that's the Jewish law. In this case, the Jewish law is clear.